Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Volac's first Feed for Growth webinar. I'm Samantha Sampson, and I'm the Product Manager for Young Animal Nutrition here at Volac. Today, our speakers are Dr. Jessica Cook, Volac's Research Scientist, and Ian Watson, our Global Technical Manager. They will be talking to you today about our recently published research showing the comparisons between skim-based and whey-based calf milk replacer, as well as the importance of high-quality ingredients, specific and unique manufacturing, and finishing with what is Volac Imunopro and how can it benefit calf health. Before we get started, just to let everyone know, we have several administrators available if you have any issues regarding sound, visibility, or joining the event. Please use the chat function to the side of the screen and they will do their best to assist you. We'll be taking all questions at the end of the session, but feel free to submit questions throughout using the Q&A function, also to the right of your screen. If you have any questions or queries which you'd like to submit later on or would like to take offline, please email feedforgrowth@volac.com. So to kick off our session, I'd like to introduce Dr. Jessica Cook.
Good morning. Thank you very much, Sam. One slight technical issue left. I don't appear to be able to share my content at the moment, so hoping that can be fixed. As Sam said, I am Dr. Jessica Cook, Volac's Research Scientist. I am responsible for the young animal research and development, feeding the latest science into our innovations process for product development, as well as using this latest scientific research to provide the most up-to-date best practice recommendations for calf and heifer rearing. This morning, I'm going to present to you our latest piece of research where we determined the effect of feeding skim or whey-based milk replacer on calf performance. Right, hopefully you can now all see my screen. So, dairy ingredients are the main source of protein in milk replacers, and these include skim and whey. The proteins which make up whole milk are casein and whey protein. Casein makes up 80% of the total protein, with the remaining 20% coming from whey protein. Skim milk powder can be described simply as whole milk with the fat removed. So in skim milk powder, the protein composition has not changed. It's still got 80% casein, 20% whey protein. Whey protein is a co-product of cheese production. So liquid whey can be defined as the liquid fraction remaining after the precipitation of the caseins. There are various different ways to process this liquid whey, resulting in different types of whey, and this is something that Ian will be discussing a bit later on. I am going to start by looking at how the calf actually digests the different types of proteins. The newborn calf is capable of digesting casein and whey protein, fat, and lactose. When whole milk enters the abomasum, a clot is formed as a result of the enzymes renin and pepsin and the hydrochloric acid in the abomasum acting upon the casein protein. The clot is slowly digested and emptied from the abomasum into the small intestine. In the small intestine, the partially digested casein is then digested further by the proteases. When you've got whey protein, so you've got whey protein in whole milk, the whey protein and the lactose initially trapped within the casein clot are released from the clot and pass through the abomasum into the small intestine. In the small intestine, the whey proteins here are digested by the proteases. Whey protein is naturally digested in the small intestine by these proteases without the action of any of the abomasal enzymes. This is in contrast to casein protein that has to be digested, can only be digested in the small intestine after a good clot formation has occurred in the abomasum. And that is because the enzymes in the small intestine appear incapable of hydrolyzing the specific bonds that need to be acted upon by the pepsin and renin in the abomasum. When whey is the only source of dairy protein in the milk replacer, no clot will form in the abomasum due to the absence of casein. However, previous research has shown that the clotting effect of casein is not required for optimal calf performance. So it's been shown that dry skim and whey protein concentrate are comparable sources of protein from milk replacer diets for young calves. However, a lot of this research was done many years ago, back in the 1990s, and at which time we were feeding calves quite differently to what we do today. So in a lot of this earlier research, they used low milk feeding rates, so they were only feeding calves upwards of 600 grams of milk powder per day, compared to what we would typically do today by feeding calves 900 grams of milk powder, if not more than this. Furthermore, the composition of the whey-based milk replacers used in this earlier research was not clearly defined. Therefore, we wanted to determine the effect of the proportions of skim and whey on the development, growth, and health of dairy calves when they were fed at high levels of up to 1,050 grams of dry matter per day. So we carried out a piece of research at Athby, Hillsborough, Northern Ireland at the end of 2018 into the start of 2019. We formulated 4 different milk replacers that were all contributed by different ratios of skim to whey protein concentrate. The milk replacer diets were all a 26% crude protein, 16% fat formulation, and they all contained dairy protein only, so there was no vegetable protein contained in any of the milk replacer diets. The 4 different milk replacer treatment groups are listed here. So we had a high skim content, so 66% of the ingredient was skim milk powder. We had a 44% skim, a 22% skim, and then a 0% skim. So in this 0% skim, all of the protein was coming from whey protein concentrate. And the source of the whey protein concentrate used in the diets was Volac's Imunopro calf milk base. So we had 80 Holstein Friesian calves on this trial, and so we had 20 calves per treatment group. All the calves were fed colostrum twice daily until day 5. On day 5, all the calves were introduced to their milk replacement treatment, and all the milk replacers were mixed at 150 grams per litre. From day 5 to day 10, the calves were offered 5 litres of milk per day. From day 11 to day 34, they were up at their maximum milk allowance, so they were getting 7 litres of milk per day. So this is when they were getting 1,050 grams of milk powder per day. And then from day 35, they underwent a gradual weaning process, so they were weaned over a 3-week period. So from day 35 through to day 49, they were then taken back down to 5 litres of milk per day, and then for the last week, up until weaning, they were offered just 2 litres of milk once daily. So all the calves were weaned on day 56. On average, the calves were consuming in total 41 kilograms of milk powder per calf over the milk feeding period. All the calves were offered calf starter and water ad lib from birth, and then they were offered chopped straw from weaning. The calves were housed individually until the end of the experimental period on day 70. So moving on to the results of the experiment. So you can see here we've got the different treatment groups along the top. So we've got the 66% skim, the 44% skim, 22% skim, and the 0% skim. So in that 0% skim, that's where we're getting all of the whey protein concentrate contributing to the overall crude protein content. So the first thing to really note from this table is that for each of the different parameters that we looked at, so we looked at the weights of the calves, the daily live weight gain, and the health of the calves, there was actually no significant difference between any of the 4 treatment groups. So looking at the weights of them first, at birth, on average, all the calves weighed 41 kilos at birth. By day 56 at weaning, you can see that there was no significant difference between the 4 treatment groups. And if we look at what the 66% skim group achieved, so they weighed on average 73.2 kilos at weaning. And then we looked at the calves that were fed the 0% skim, so the ones that were getting all the whey protein concentrate, they had identical weights at weaning, so they were weighing 73.5 kilos. So when we compare the two extremes, there was no difference in weight between them. We followed the calves through until day 70, and again on day 70 there was no significant difference in body weight between the 4 treatment groups. Moving on to daily life weight gain, we broke daily life weight gain down into the first 2 weeks of life, and then from day 14 to day 56, and then we continued to measure body weight gain during the post-weaning period up until day 70. So over the first 2 weeks of life, there was very little difference between the 4 treatment groups. And again, the highest skim group, the 66% skim, were achieving 0.38 kilograms per day, whereas the ones getting 0% skim, all whey protein concentrate, achieved 0.4 kilograms per day. From day 14 to day 56, again comparing the two extremes, so the 66% skim achieved 0.64 kilograms per day, and the ones getting all the whey protein concentrate, the 0% skims, achieved 0.63 kilograms per day. And a similar picture in the post-weaning period, there was no significant difference in daily life weight gain in that post-weaning period. When we looked at the health parameters of these calves, overall the incidence of calf ill health was relatively low across all the treatments. So that's reflected in the low number of scour and respiratory episodes that have been recorded. Again, there was no significant difference overall between the 4 treatment groups, but when we actually looked at the number of scour episodes, you can see that as we reduced the amount of skim in the milk replacer diet, i.e. we increased the amount of whey protein concentrate, the number of scour episodes appear to numerically decrease. And what we think we can see here is that the whey fraction of colostrum and whole milk is the part that actually contains all of the beneficial ingredients, such as the immunoglobulins and the lactoferrin, that actually help to support the immune system of those young calves. So we all know the value of colostrum to the young calf. And the reason why it's so important is because it's made up predominantly of whey protein. So 65% of its protein is whey protein. And it's the whey fraction that contains all of the bioactive factors that are critical for the calf's success. So here, as we increase the amount of whey protein concentrate in the diet, the more of those immunoglobulins and lactoferrin, all of those beneficial ingredients will be increased, and the more you'll be providing to that calf. So, which is why I think these calves are suffering from fewer scour episodes. This graph is looking at the body weights that we recorded on a weekly basis. So the blue bars are the 66% skim, the orange bars are the 44% skim, grey bars 22% skim, and the yellow is the 0% skim, so that all the whey protein concentrate. And overall, you can see there's very little difference in body weight by week up until weaning on day 56. But if we were to pull out one bar that seems to lag behind, it seems to be this grey bar. So the milk replacer diet that was only 22% skim, so the lowest skim content, just appears to just fall behind the other 3 groups. Now, it's previously been shown that if you reduce the amount of skim, i.e. reduce the amount of casein in a milk replacer diet, you actually reduce the curd firmness, meaning you're getting very weak and loose clots forming, which break up and leave the abomasum more quickly, which can actually negatively affect the calf performance. So just to pull together the overall conclusions of our study, there was no difference in body weight at weaning between the 0% skim group and the highest skim group, the 66% skim group. The body weight at weaning and on day 70 appeared to be lowest for the 22% skim, so the group that had the lowest skim content. Calf health was comparable across all treatment groups, although we did see fewer scour episodes recorded for those calves on the 0% skim group, so the treatment group that were getting the most whey protein concentrate suffered the fewest scour episodes. So overall, we concluded that the use of Volax whey protein concentrate as the major source of protein in milk replacer was equal to the use of skim milk when fed at high levels in terms of calf performance and growth. So as we saw when we were looking at the lowest, the milk replacer with the lowest skim content, a weak clot can be detrimental for calf performance. The relative strength of clot formation in a skim milk powder can be influenced by the amount of skim that you've got in the milk replacer, i.e. the amount of casein that's present, as well as the manufacturing and the processing methods. So with whole milk, a milk replacer that has a high skim content, you get a solid clot forming. This solid clot is retained in the abomasum, and then that good clot formation is then thought to actually promote nutrient digestibility in the small intestine. If, however, you've got a milk replacer that's got a low skim content, this is when you get your weak and loose clots forming in the abomasum. These weak clots break up more rapidly, and that's when you then get undigested casein leaving the abomasum more quickly and appearing in the small intestine. And then the enzymes in the small intestine actually appear incapable of hydrolyzing the specific bonds that are acted upon by rennin and pepsin in the abomasum, and that is then what negatively affects calf performance. So when using a skim milk powder, the inclusion level of the skim is important, as well as the manufacturing and processing methods. So a high processing temperature has also been shown to actually reduce curd firmness, and calves that are then fed skim milk powder that's been processed under high temperatures have been shown to have a reduced growth rate and an increased incidence of scours. So for any of the proteins that you're processing, and Ian will cover this in some more detail shortly, it's really important to actually use low temperature processing methods to retain the integrity of those proteins. So to summarize, when skim is used, a firm clot is needed to control the flow of casein from the abomasum into the small intestine. Low skim milk content and high processing temperatures can actually all reduce the speed of clot formation and clot firmness. A poorly formed loose weak clot can be detrimental to animal health as well as performance. Calves can digest whey proteins as efficiently as skim proteins, although the whey proteins in milk do not clot. And it's really important to remember that the whey protein, even in whole milk, is naturally digested in the small intestine by the proteases, by the enzymes that are present. With whey-based milks, there's factors that actually control the rate of abomasal emptying, such as the mineral content. So a high mineral content, i.e. your ash levels, can actually accelerate the rate of passage of digestion from the abomasum, and this can increase the risk of digestive upsets. So it's really important when looking at milk replacers to actually ensure that you're using a milk replacer where the ash content is kept to a minimum. Whey protein contains naturally occurring bioactive proteins such as the immunoglobulins and lactoferrin, and these are all essential in supporting the immune system and influencing the growth and development of the calf. So from our latest piece of research, I've shown you that using whey protein concentrates, so such as Volax Imunopro calf milk base, you can successfully feed this to young calves and get excellent calf performance. But calf performance is linked to much more than just whether you've got a skim or whey-based milk replacer. So calf milk replacers can actually vary enormously in terms of the type and quality of the ingredients that are present, which can all impact on calf health, growth and development. So now I'm going to hand over to Ian to discuss the differences between Volac's Imunopro calf milk base and other whey-based ingredients and how this can actually impact on calf performance.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Just going to start sharing my screen, but just before I do, just again, a bit of an introduction on myself. So my name is Ian Watson. I'm technical manager for the young animal division here at Volac. So that's very much on the milk replacer front of the animal nutrition business. And my sort of role, responsibilities, very much looking after the specifications of the milk replacers and also the recipes and the ingredients that are used to make up the milk replacers that we place into the marketplace. So my job this morning is just to run through the process that we run in our factory in West Wales in Fellenfach, and that is where we make our Imunopro base, and also run through some of the differences that we can see when we talk about whey and what the ingredient actually looks like. So I'm just going to share my screen just now. I go there and then there and then change my. So hopefully you can now see my screen with the heading there on milk replacers, milk protein processing. So as Jessica has run through when talking about the Skim work that we carried out in Northern Ireland at AFB in Hillsborough, the dairy proteins do make up the majority of milk replacers. And they're very much split into skim or skim-based milk replacers or whey-based milk replacers. Now, there is a difference there in terms of whey, and that's where we're sort of trying to get to in terms of the processing that happens after the cheese manufacturing has been carried out. So the liquid whey that we generally work with is very low in solids. So it's got about 1% protein in there as an example, and majority of that is water. And we've got a number of options in terms of the further chain processing that happens to that material. It can purely be dried, and that's where we come following down the whey stream there to the left-hand side. Just a drying process will give you what was classed as whey powder, which again is a common ingredient when we're looking at milk replacers. Whey powder generally, as we'll come on to, is about 12% protein. We then, if we go for the sort of the middle stream there, we have crystallization, and that's where we're looking to extract a proportion of lactose from the whey, and the lactose then goes into confectionery and bakery as an example, and we're left with an ingredient delactosed whey. Now, delactosed whey, as I say, is a process with some heat there. So talking about the heat treatment of ingredients and retaining the integrity of the proteins in there is very critical. But what happens during that sort of lactose crystallization is that, as I say, the proportion of lactose is removed, but everything else is concentrated up. So that includes the protein, but it also includes some undesirable factors such as ash, sodium, potassium, undesirable salts. When we look at the ultrafiltration stream to the right, this is very much the processing that we follow with our factory, and this is the ingredient that we used in comparison against the Skim in the trial work that Jessica's just spoken about. So we're doing everything at low temperatures, and effectively we're deconstructing the whey to its individual components, and then we build it back up together again, all done at low temperatures to provide a quality raw material which forms the base of our milk replacers. And that's what we classed as Imunopro, which is unique to our processing capability in our factory in West Wales. So when we go through and look at the typical analysis and some of these raw materials, as I've already touched on, the processing that happens downstream from the cheese manufacturer impacts on what we end up with in terms of the quality, the protein, oil, lactose, and ash content. So if we start with cow's milk, if we take that from its 12.5% dry matter up to 100% dry matter, we have a material which is about 26% protein, roughly 33% oil, and the ash content is around about 7. Dried skim milk powder, which is utilized in the trial work we spoke about, has a protein content of 35% protein. It's got a low oil content in 1 because we've creamed off the butter, etc., and a lactose content of about 52%, with ash about 7. Continuing through, whey powder also has ash content of 7, but we've seen an increase there in the lactose content, and the protein is 12.5 to 13%. So quite a weak protein source in comparison to the other raw materials available for milk replacer manufacture. When we come on to the delactose whey, as I said, the main aim within that process is the partial removal of lactose. And you can see the lactose there has dropped by about 23–24%. But what's happened is the protein content has increased. Oil hasn't changed too much, but the ash content has had a dramatic increase. And that's something we would like to sort of keep away from in terms of the ash content. It's very important in terms of the finished product and the rate of abomasal emptying in the finished product as it passes through the calf. Ultrafiltrated whey protein, again, matches up to very similar to skim milk powder in the fact that generally it's 35% protein or been standardized to 35% protein. But we're able to retain some of the natural milk fat and oils that come through from milk and comes through in the whey, and they're concentrated up. And we'll go on to how that happens in one of the next slides. Lactose, again, is around that 50% mark, and it's also got low ash. So again, the Imunopro that we're basing all of our milk replacers on is high in protein, which is highly digestible. It's rich in fat, natural milk fat, and it's also low in ash. When we look at the protein makeup in terms of cow's milk and then into colostrum, cow's milk contains, as I say, 26% protein. However, the breakdown between casein and whey is about an 80–20 ratio, and it retains a small portion of natural immunoglobulins. As Jessica's already pointed out, the immunoglobulins and what we class the bioactive compounds of milk proteins and milk are held in the whey fraction. So as you can see, when we then look at the colostrum that's manufactured by the cow as that first feed, there is a big switch there between the whey portion and the casein proportion. And again, that's just a sort of demonstrating the fact that immunoglobulins and the functional proteins are held within the whey fraction of milk. Skim milk powder still retains the milk protein in there, and it's still in there the same ratio as you'd see in whole milk, so an 80–20 ratio. So 80% of that would be casein, 20% would be whey, and then you come through into the whey or the whey fraction. So the casein has been taken out in the cheese manufacturing process, and we're left with 100% whey. As we can see, protein contents can vary, as we've said about the processing previously. and therefore that has an effect on the ability to retain the functionality of the globular proteins. So these proteins are very susceptible to heat. So we want to be doing everything as at a cool level as possible to maintain the integrity and the digestibility of this protein source, to ensure the calf's going to get the best performance from feeding these materials. So where does this all happen? This is our plant over in West Wales, and this is where we are processing liquid whey, and that comes into the plant from a variety of cheese manufacturers in the UK as a liquid, and that's where we turn it into our base for our milk replacers. But we also work in coordination there with our food stream of the business as well. So we are manufacturing whey protein isolates, which are going into the bulk powders and protein shakes that we see for into gyms and also into adult nutrition, elder nutrition. And we also work in combination with a lactose plant there as well, where after the protein process, we then crystallize lactose out there, which is slightly different to the delactosed whey model. So in terms of the technology that we're running, this is, again, a very simplistic diagram, and it's just running through from milk through all the way to our milk replacer and our milk replacer bases. So we're obviously the cheese manufacture process. We then take the whey and we have multi-stage filtration. Now the first stage of filtration there is that deconstruction almost, where we're taking out any excess salt that we don't want, so any undesirable sodium and potassium above levels that are balanced for the finished milk replacer. And we also take out at that stage lactose. So we're taking the lactose away and we're left with a concentrated milk protein. From that concentrated milk protein, we then do further filtration, and that's very simply with different size of filters running through the system, where we're able to absolutely purify the protein that goes into our dairy and lifestyle ingredients. And then we also have a product on that which contains immunoglobulins and functional lipids through into the calf milk replacer business. And how that's happening is that the functional proteins and the fats that are naturally there within whey are actually larger molecules, and so they drop out of the filtration process at different stages, and that makes it a very nutritious base for coming through into our milk replacers. From the initial multi-filtration stage, as we said, we take the lactose out of the permeate that's in there, and what we're left with there is a very high calcium permeate, which is generally calcium and proportion of lactose to balance the protein back out again. We also at that stage add in fats and oils, and that's sort of vegetable fats and oils, and again that's the digestible replacement of milk fats into the spray dryer, and we have that as one liquid that's coming through the spray dryer as molecules that are wrapped up together. Now that's again important in terms of the physical characteristics, but again keeping everything through the process at a low temperature maintains the integrity of all the nutrients that are in there. So essentially, as I started out, we said that liquid whey had very little in the form of solids. It's mostly water. And through that process, just to give an understanding of what we're taking out and what we're left with, we're taking out the sugar, we take out the protein into the sports nutrition business, and through that we're left with a Imunopro, which is actually about 11% protein, with 3% natural milk fat coming through, a small proportion of sugar in the form of lactose, and still mostly water at that stage. But that's classified as a concentrated whey protein and phospholipid base. If we were to purely dry that material, we would end up with an ingredient with about 65% protein and about 16% oil. And it's that base there that we then balance back out with lactose, and we balance back out, or permeate, we balance that back out with vegetable oils to give us our base for the raw materials for our milk replacers. So again, just a couple of pictures just to show the insides here. This is the filtration. Not much to see here, but the filters are held within the stainless steel there. And as I say, the molecules are dropping out at different levels depending on the size of those molecules. And this is the spray dryer that we operate, and the spray dryer was commissioned in 2017. And the spray dryer is a very integral part to the quality of the milk replacers that we're manufacturing. And this is more, as well as the nutritional and maintaining the goodness, it's all about the physical characteristics as well in terms of the mix quality and the ability for our milk replacers to stay in good emulsive state if shear mixed. So milk as a whole, we come on to some of the differences in what we're able to capture by almost deconstructing the whey. We're able to capture some of the functional ingredients in there, and then pull them back together. But overall, milk is a complex ingredient, but it is very special, and we've sort of classed it the magic of milk. So not only does it give us the growth on the animal, so it gives us amino acids and the correct profile and energy content to utilize that to get good growth, actually it also primes the immune system. So that priming of the immune system would be the immunoglobulins that are held within milk and held within the whey portion. Assisting in pathogen control, lactoferrin, lactoperoxidase, again, which are there to help with pathogen control and gut health and keeping the calf healthy. It also shapes the future growth and development. And that's, again, thinking about the signaling process that happens in the calf, so often called the lactocrine signaling. But we all know that how we feed these calves when they are pre-weaned, they are digesting milk proteins. That's their a highly digestible feed, and it's what we feed and how we feed these calves actually has a massive impact on the development of the animals, which shapes its future all the way through into first, second, third lactation, and that's thinking about sort of vital organs and mammary gland development in those infancy stages. So we actually do a really important job during this milk feeding phase. So as we come through, Imunopro, as we said, going through the ultrafiltration stages of whey processing, it provides us with three main nutritional pointers in terms of protein, fat, and sugars. The protein is both nutritional, so amino acids. So again, we'll all be familiar with essential amino acids and the utilization of those. The functional proteins, so immunoglobulins and lactoferrins, we also contain in there natural fat, which is the phospholipids, and sugars, so oligosaccharides, which are naturally there. And what we're able to do is, as I say, concentrate those up. So some of the work that we have been doing, again, is taking our different streams throughout the full process that we run over in our plant in West Wales. And we had a large analytical project on the go where we took them and tried to understand what parts were following which streams and what was ending up where. So when we looked at that, we then came through and thinking about the amino acids as a starting point. So we then did a large degree of analytical work to assign exactly what is there to allow us to balance the finished product. So we know that amino acids are essential building blocks for protein, and they're there for driving muscle development and growth. So what we're able to do and demonstrate is actually the ability to concentrate up the first limiting amino acids in lysine, and we start off with a good proportion in there in the raw material. So again, reducing the reliance on it, potentially synthetic amino acids through in the finished product. The one which is a really interesting one for us is the leucine, which is contained within Imunopro. Now, leucine actually sort of almost does two jobs, but it is critical for driving the rate of muscle synthesis. It's stimulating muscle synthesis, and this is kind of one of the key points in terms of thinking it into the sports nutrition and nutrition for elderly people as well. So it's signaling it has a signaling effect to muscles. Actually, you need to start growing, and that's a really crucial one in terms of laying down that muscle growth. So unlike leucine is there naturally, but we don't have a synthetic form of leucine. So we take the level of leucine essentially that's naturally there in the raw materials that we're using. And again, a key point here is we actually start with elevated levels of leucine in our main raw material. If we then move on to protein for health, so we're thinking about here immunoglobulins. And again, we all know about immunoglobulins and colostrum, but the key here is actually to maintain the integrity of these proteins and maintain the integrity of the immunoglobulins so that they're there and feeding their way through. So looking at whole milk and skim milk powder and whey powder, they're quite low in immunoglobulins, and again, that can be due to a dilution factor in whole milk. Very little there remaining in the whey fraction in skim milk powder, but even in whey powder, the processing temperature there can actually have an impact on the integrity. So everything we're needing to look to do is actually use low temperatures throughout the process to maintain that. Moving on again to protein for health, we're looking at lactoferrin. And again, these have been identified in Imunopro in our big batch of testing, and they're at elevated levels. So lactoferrin has iron binding properties and anti-inflammatory properties. And we can see there just a brief graph of a study that was carried out in 2017, where calves that were scouring actually were given 3 grams of lactoferrin per day. The impact of that meant that the calves were actually less likely to die from the scour or the illness, or were to be killed from poor performance. So again, we're looking at that and concentrating that up and having a natural health aspect in terms of the raw materials coming through in Imunopro. Fats and fatty acids, there is a small proportion of fat, milk fat coming through. In the dry form, we've measured that at about 16%. Not only do the fats form a direct fuel source for the animal, but they also carry out a really important antimicrobial role in terms of the fatty acid profile that's being delivered. So we need to balance that. But also the membrane, the milk fat globule membrane, which contains phospholipids and sphingolipids. And again, they're really important as an antimicrobial function and helping to develop and mature the gut to be able to fight off bacteria. So again, natural phospholipids feeding their way all the way through from whole milk into the whey fraction and into the Imunopro base. And sugars. So sugars is generally lactose, as we'd find in milk replacers. And yes, we've taken a lot of the lactose out in that initial filtration stage. However, there is a complex mix of sugars which actually are bound to the proteins of fats which feed its way through the side of the process that go into the Imunopro base. Now, these are generally in the form of oligosaccharides or GOS, and they have a really important role in terms of the development of the gut and the good bugs that are in the gut and the development overall of the microbiome and of the calf's stomach. So again, helps set and thrive the gut and a healthy gut through the system. So a really important part of what we're putting together. So overall, what we're classed as Imunopro. It's concentrated whey proteins. It's been treated at low temperatures to maintain the integrity of that, and it retains the phospholipids through. It's got vital amino acids, but also functional proteins such as immunoglobulins, lactoferrins, alongside the fats and sugars. And this is this material which forms the base of all of our milk replacers that we manufacture and sell into the agricultural industry. So in summary, overall, we're at the stage there where we have Imunopro. Not all whey proteins are the same. There are different processes that happen, which will impact the performance and of those whey proteins within the calf. And so we're actually looking to concentrate those up and get the goodness from that. When we looked at the trial work with Whey and Skim, we saw that both can deliver very good calf performance through the stage. And actually, overall, the primary source of nutrition is feeding more milk from birth in that first sort of four weeks. And so actually has a real positive effect on calf performance, and it has an impact on long-term development of these animals as well. So overall, in terms of the feeding of whey or whey-based milk replacers against skim-based milk replacers, actually, like for like, we can get really good performance as long as the quality is there in terms of the overall quality of the raw materials and, you know, the origin of that. So with that was my last slide. I'll then hand back and we'll see if there's any questions that have come in. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica. Thank you, Ian, for that. I hope everybody found it interesting. I know I certainly did. We have had a few questions coming in. So first of all, I'm going to ask this one to Jessica. What way do immunoglobulins help the calf?
Yes, so the immunoglobulins are the antibodies, and because calves are born with no immunity, it's absolutely essential that they get their antibodies to protect them in the first few weeks of life and to provide them with that protection from disease challenges from their dams. So by feeding calves colostrum from the dam, you're providing them with the immunoglobulins, which are the antibodies that are then absorbed by the calf gut and actually help protect the calf from common disease challenges. And so the key with the immunoglobulins, i.e. the antibodies, are they'll only provide protection against the disease challenges that cow has been exposed to itself on the farm. So, which is why when we're talking about colostrum, it's so important to feed the calves, the young calf, colostrum from its dam that's been collected on your own farm, so that you're actually protecting the calf against the disease challenges that it'll be exposed to.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you. And we've had another one in regards to scour, and it's what would the average cost of a scour treatment be?
If I take that one, it's very difficult to put sort of figures on it because there's so many different outcomes from the scour outbreak. You can have reduced growth rate, you can have losses associated with mortality if the calf actually dies, and then you've got the treatment costs. But sort of the most recent figure that I have seen has come from MSD Animal Health, and they've put a figure on of the cost of a scour outbreak being around £57.94 per cow in a herd. But as I say, it's quite a difficult one to sort of get a figure on because there's so many different outcomes of a scour outbreak.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you for that. And another question we've had in as well is, does Volac analyse the protein in the raw whey to determine which amino acids are present in the liquid before adding the amino acids? Ian, I think that one's probably one for you.
Yeah, no, so that's an interesting question there. So the overall amino acid profile that we're delivering to the calf needs to be balanced, but also needs to match in terms of what the performance expectations are from the calves as well. so that we're delivering the right amount of the essential amino acids. So the main ones that we'd be very much thinking about would be lysine and methionine. So we're just going to, we just look at that, we balance that. So in terms of what we do, we analyze absolutely in terms of part of the overall analytical program we carried out was looking at the overall lysine methionine content. We then know what's delivered from each of the other raw materials which are added in at that stage, and balance that through with the addition of supplementary lysine and methionine to balance overall. So we get that as a nutritious milk replacer with all the nutrients required to sustain the growth that you're looking for that particular grade of milk powder and from the calves what you're looking to achieve from the calves.
Okay, brilliant. So we're a little bit short on time, so I think if I just pick another 2 questions. Has there been any studies on heifer performance in the first lactation when calves are fed a skim or whey-based powder? And have we got any information on that?
There hasn't been any to date, but that's something that we are planning to do for the calves that we had on the trial at Athby and Hillsborough. We do plan to sort of collect fertility data and milk records from the heifers once they actually calve for the first time, because as you say, yes, that would be extremely interesting to actually see as to whether there's any long-lasting effects of how you fed the calves over the first couple of months of life. So hopefully we will have some data on that in the years to come.
Brilliant. So Ian, a quick one for you, and then we'll take the last one for maybe a bit of a discussion point afterwards. Is you mentioned that Volac obviously use this low temperature evaporation. Can you just explain the importance of that? Of course, it's very difficult to comment on what other milk powders are manufactured and their processes, but why do we choose low temperature?
Now, in terms of the processing temperature, it's really important for us to keep that as low as possible. We know that the denaturation process can start around about 56 degrees C, and that's where we start to damage some of the proteins, and that follows its way all the way through. It's not just what we do or the processors do with the milk proteins. It's actually what happens on farm as well. So where people in terms of looking at the mixing temperature of the milk and trying not to sort of boil the proteins, if you like. So the denaturation process actually reduces the digestibility of the proteins, and as I say, damages some of the goodness in terms of the immunoglobulins as they come through. So everything is done at those low temperatures absolutely to maintain the goodness that's held in there and get maximum digestibility from the raw materials. So very much important just to review that and ensure that everything's done at low temperatures.
Brilliant, thank you. Now, the last question I'm going to ask, because I know we're conscious of time, is one that everybody wants to know, which is, what is the best daily gain for calves?
Shall I start with that one? I don't think there's ever a sort of a right or wrong figure. To start with, the feed conversion efficiency rate for a young calf is around 50%. So what that means is if you're putting 100 grams of feed into those young calves, you would expect around 50 grams of growth out of them. And when we're talking about feed, this is the milk powder as well as the starter contributing to that. And it's the feed conversion efficiency rate that drops as that animal ages. So it's at its highest during the first 2 months of life. But in terms of what's the best average daily gain to be sort of aiming for, it very much depends on an individual farm's sort of aims and objectives. So each individual farm should always set a target age at first calving. And at first calving, there's a wealth of data out there showing that if you calve your heifers down at 24 months of age, they're the ones that will have the best fertility, longevity, and milk production but it's absolutely crucial that they're actually 85 to 90% of their mature body weight when they calve down. So mature body weight of your cows in your herd is from lactation 3 onwards. So that's the first target to set, age at first calving, and the body weight you need them to be at that point. So they need to be 85 to 90% of their mature body weight. You then need to work that back, because if you want them to calve down at 24 months, they need to be in calf at 15 months. So you actually need to start breeding from them at 13 to 14 months of age. So at that point, they need to be around 55 to 60% of their mature body weight at 13 to 14 months of age. So then you can work out what kind of growth rate you actually need to be aiming for to ensure that all the heifers on a unit reach the point of first breeding at 13 to 14 months of age with 55 to 60% of mature body weight. And really, that for the average farm, that equates to around 0.7 to 0.8 kilograms per day every day of their life up until 13 months of age. So during that milk feeding period, when the feed conversion efficiency rate is so high, it's always good to sort of really maximize the growth of those young animals, so you've got some flexibility later on if growth rates slip a bit when they're out at grass. So we would always recommend, if you are aiming to calve your heifers down at 24 months of age, you should really be aiming for to double your birth weight by weaning on day 56, and to really be aiming for growth rates of sort of upwards of 0.9 kilograms per day in that first sort of couple of months of life.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. So unfortunately, we are going to close there. If we haven't got to any of the questions you've asked, please keep an eye out on our social media channels, as we'll be posting them and answering them there. Thank you all for attending, and thank you to Jessica and Ian. So if you'd like to rewatch the webinar or ask any further questions, please feel free to email feedforgrowth@volac.com. And as said, we'll be posting some of the questions and answers across all of our social media channels. Thank you very much for attending.